Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is time again for Blitz Boys here on the Jack Wagon Sports Network. Slade and I are here to break down Week 7, talk about everything that happened, and also get you into the mood for Week 8. We're going to talk about James Madison and Marshall going on and update you on our Friday night event that we're bringing back once again this week. So let's go ahead and get this week's show started. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about Week 7. We'll start off with the obvious elephant in the room here. Oregon goes on the road to Washington. They had the lead late into that game. A lot of questionable calls. A lot of other fans are upset. There's only one, and I'll talk about here in a minute, that really had me upset. But they're unable to close out the game against Washington again. Washington gets a huge win at home. They looked very poised to be a college football playoff team. Michael Penix Jr. looked amazing on Saturday. Bo Nix did as well. I mean, I don't want that to be overshadowed. I think Bo Nix played a great game. He didn't turn the ball over. He threw for more yards than Penix. But just watching Penix play is almost on another level. He can fit that football into such tight windows and put his receivers in amazing positions to catch the ball. That's, I mean, I hate to say it, but that's an amazing thing to watch. And it sucks when you're getting your ass beat and you're watching that happen. You're like, wow, this guy's good. But I mean, these are two very good football teams. You knew it was going to come down to the wire. I'll get your thoughts on the game and everything that happened first, and then I'll talk about the fourth downs, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I mean, I thought that it was a great game. I got to watch a lot of the replays. I was kind of trying to sleep during this time. Oh, well, second half actually. But I think that the only thing I changed, I understand Dan Lanning is a very offensive-minded person. Very, we're gonna go out and score points no matter what. I think that before halftime you have to kick the field goal.
Yeah.
I think if at that point he misses, then you realize the rest of the game that you're not going to trust that. But if you're not even going to give the guy a chance, then you have to go for it every time like he did, But I think that first one you definitely have to kick the field. I mean, what? There's 4 seconds left or something. What was the time? 6
But yeah,
seconds. Something.
it was the last play of the half.
Yeah, and so I mean, I just think that you have to trot the field goal team out there and try and be down one. It was down one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they would have been down one.
Yeah, I just think that that's what you have to do. Obviously, we don't know we don't know that the final score is going to be 3-point difference.
Right.
He can miss that. They go in, same kind of feeling, maybe even a little bit more down on themselves because now they know their kicker can't kick the damn ball. But yeah, I just think that that's the only thing that I change in this game. Like you said, both quarterbacks played amazing. I think that if we get to see this again, we will be very lucky to see it again because, boy, if we thought we had a quarterback battle or a team battle with Oklahoma and Texas in the previous weeks, I mean, this was way better than that.
Yeah. I mean, could you imagine though, conference championship weekend? Not only do we get that Oklahoma Texas rematch, but we also get this rematch. I mean, that can just amplify that entire weekend by 10.
Yeah, then you have like Michigan versus Iowa.
Exactly. But yeah, so back to the game. No, I'm in the same boat as you, and I understand the logic behind, and I made a TikTok video on this on Sunday, and I kind of broke down, okay, here's as another football coach, this is what and of course I can't speak for Dan Lanning. I'm not actually in his head, but watching what unfolded, okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is probably what he was thinking as well. You just got a huge turnover. You drive down the field. Your offense had really been moving the ball pretty effectively, except for a few, drives here and there. I think they had only punted one time before that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're driving down the field. You look at the clock. There's 6 seconds. You're down by 4. You can kick the field goal, only be down by 1, or up to that point, Washington had not stopped an offense inside the 20, or excuse me, inside goal to go. I think their opposing teams were 7 for 7 on scoring with goal to go situations. And so you look at that stat, you look at how well your offense has been playing, and again, you have a super senior quarterback in Bo Nix, who is a very good leader, and you put the trust in his hands. So I understand that rationale, and instead of being down, and you're also looking at is okay, worst case scenario, we're down by 4 points here going into halftime. Best case scenario, we're up by three going into halftime, and so I get that side of it. And like you said, obviously we don't know what the future is going to be. We don't know it's going to come down to a last second field goal to tie the game. I mean, that's a completely different situation. If they make that, obviously that kicks to win the game. So, but you don't know that at that time.
Mm.
I knew as soon as that play went off, I was like, this is going to come down to a kick now. Like, I just, you have that intuition as a fan. You're like, it always does. That this is how it's going to come, what it's going to come down to. But I understood the rationale. I agree with you, though. I would have taken the almost guaranteed points there. I think he makes that kick from that range. But talking about the other fourth downs, the one late in the third quarter, I was perfectly fine with. Washington really put the foot through our throats to start the second half. You need to get some kind of momentum back. So I was completely fine with that fourth down call. And then the one at the end of the game is you, your defense had played pretty well all day. Not great, but pretty well. At the other end of the table, though, you're looking at a potential Heisman quarterback, one that we had, as we had mentioned, can fit that ball in the really tight windows and is a born leader. He's gonna lead that team down the field. Um, and if you get this fourth down, you win the football game. You can kneel out the clock, it's over. You need 2 yards, and the game is over. My issue with everything, though, was just the play calling. I wasn't a big fan of it on third and fourth down, especially. Um, to start that last drive, or next to last drive, I guess, when we were trying to close out the game. There was a 3rd and 2 situation earlier in that drive, and we ran a quick out, dumped it to our tight end. He got the first down, and that's all we needed. And then all of a sudden, we go, we get a 3rd and 2 later in this drive now, and we're like, okay, we're gonna. Washington expects to run. They loaded the box, and we tried to run the ball right up the middle. Why was there not, a quick out pass again or anything like that? So I wasn't a huge fan of the play calling. Um, and then, missing the kick at the end is it sucks. But at the same time, that was a game where even if he makes that kick, we're heading to 4 or 5 overtimes at least. And especially with this new shitty format that we have with overtime, it would have. I probably honestly would have had a heart attack and died by the end of that game had it gone to overtime. Um, but nonetheless, this is a very good game. Neither team came out looking bad. Obviously, Washington looks pretty great right now coming out of it. But I mean, Oregon still looks like a good football team. They were the better offense, which I thought was a little surprising going to that game. I feel like Washington was very heavy on the offense. Had the I thought they had the better offense coming into that game. And Oregon's offense really, I felt like played better. I was also just need to give a quick shout out to both defenses because we were talking about it Friday night. Is this the game where Michael Penix can finally get his average up? 400 or above passing yards, and we held him to I think 320, right around there. But I mean, both defenses played pretty good football all day, for as good as you can play against those two offenses.
Very good for Pac-12 defenses, I would say.
Yeah,
Going
absolutely.
against stellar offenses, you mean giving up 300 yards to the Heisman top 2 person right now, I would say, is very good.
Yeah. But nonetheless, I mean, I will be very happy if Oregon can run the table and make it back and play Washington again. I think that's the best case scenario for both teams. But as we've mentioned, this is a very difficult upcoming schedule for Oregon and Washington as well. They have to go on the road at USC and Oregon State. Those are 2 difficult teams to go on the road and play against. I think they also play Utah at home, and then Washington State, who has not had a very good stretch here the last 2 weeks, but they're still a good football team at heart. Oregon has to play them this week. Everybody's already talking shit about them. I'm like, I am not saying anything until that game is over because that Washington State is Washington State, Stanford, and whenever we play either one of the Arizona teams, they always find a way to hang around in the games and just keep it close until late. So I'm holding my breath.
Hey, I don't want what happened to Oregon State to happen to my team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One thing I did want to say real quick is if we do get to see a rematch of these two teams in the Pac-12 championship, I do think that if they go to overtime, I need to see them beat the Penn State Illinois record for overtimes.
I think they
I
will,
need to see it
honestly.
happen because there's
Yeah,
virtually, like we talked about. I mean, it's red zone. Defense is not there. I mean, you have two
yeah,
quarterbacks that are really able to kind of move the ball around and able to move their feet. So it's perfect situation for these two in an overtime situation and go for two. Both teams like to do that too. I mean, I think I saw a stat that Washington has punted the ball like 3 times this season or something like that. It's ridiculous.
yeah. No, yeah, I think that's definitely on the table if those two meet up again. Let's stay in the Pac-12. Let's go over to what happened on Friday night in a different game. Colorado hosted Stanford. We went to bed. It was 29 to nothing. We wake up and the final score is 46-43. I think, I mean, we immediately started texting each other going, what the hell happened last night? Um, how do you think a loss like this affects Colorado going forward? How does a team lose a game like this and then pick up and finish out their season? Because granted, they're still sitting at 4-3. They still have a very respectable record. But I had said this when UCF blew a 35-0 lead to Baylor. UCF hasn't won a game since then, by the way. A loss like this affects you mentally in so many different ways. It's very difficult to wake up the next morning, pick yourself back up, and get right back to work. You know, it's very humbling, and it's also it. Even when you get in different situations down the road, it's shit. Are we gonna blow this lead too? It finds different ways to affect you through the rest of the season. So, how do you think this affects Colorado moving forward, and how does it change your outlook for the rest of their season?
I think that it's definitely going to be hard for them to overcome. Seeing as it would have been different had it happened the week before against Arizona State, and then they go out and have a chance to whack Stanford and kind of get the momentum back up. But I mean,
Mhm.
they go on the road to UCLA, and then they have Oregon State at home. Two very tough teams that they're going to play these upcoming weeks, and it's not teams that they're going to run the score up on and have a chance to kind of hold on.
Right.
Also, Colorado has played every game basically close this season, aside from the Oregon game, and Nebraska. I guess it was more than a 7 point game. Every one of the games that they've played, they could have lost at any point during the game,
Right.
and I think that just goes to show. I mean, the over under for them to start the season was like 3.5 games or something like that. They beat that. They're at 4 wins. I honestly think that the max they get to is 5 this season. I think that they possibly go in and beat Arizona, even though Arizona very good team this year compared to what they have been. But I do think that that's a game that they could stumble up on. I don't see them beating Washington State, Utah, Oregon State, or UCLA. So I think
Mhm.
that 5 wins, I think one more win on the season is what they're looking at. And I think it's going to be unfortunate for them because they had so much hype and momentum because they won games that they weren't supposed to win.
Right.
But I also think that Travis Hunter shouldn't have played as many snaps as he did. I mean, I think that coming back from injury, I don't think you should be playing both sides of the ball as heavy as what was going on. And I understand that it was probably necessary, especially
Mhm.
once they are up 29-0. You start resting some guys, and then the team starts coming back, and you're like, oh shit, we gotta we gotta put them on both sides. I think it hurts them for the upcoming future, obviously, but I think in terms of season goal, I think they've already surpassed that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I agree. I mean, looking at their upcoming schedule, I don't see 2 games they can win. I mean, obviously, this is college football, anything can happen. Um, but it's a very grueling schedule. You know, UCLA is they have a very good defense. Their offense struggles. Oregon State is a good football team on both sides of the ball. I would actually disagree. I think they have a better chance of beating Washington State watching them the past couple weeks than they do Arizona. Arizona's gained more and more momentum the past couple weeks. Their freshman quarterback looks unreal. Thank God Oregon does not play them this season because that is a team that scares me. Um, and then they finish out on the road at Utah. Um, but I think, and going back, I think the biggest thing that helps Colorado right now is they have a bye week now. You just got your ass beat. Now you get to okay, we're gonna take a week. We're gonna decompress. We're gonna refocus, and then get ready for UCLA. But at the same time, I mean, that can also affect you worse because now you're sitting with this for an extra week. You know, you don't get
Mm-hmm.
a chance to go out there immediately and take that taste out of your mouth, like you said. Um, so it can be a double-edged sword as well. Like you said, yeah, I think they've overachieved the national expectation for them, but I think personally inside that program, they definitely want to make a bowl game this year. Again, not out of the reach yet. They still need 2 wins, and it's not impossible. And then as far as Travis Hunter, I agree with you. I think he needs to play one side of the ball. I think he definitely needs to play defense more than anything. I felt like their offense was still pretty decent without him, but they are sorely missing him on the defensive side of the ball. And you could tell by the end of that game, playing both sides. I think it was overtime when yeah, first overtime when they caught the ball off his back. It's not his fault,
No,
but still, but you could tell throughout the end of the game there he's getting
they
tired.
were all tired.
Um,
Him,
yeah,
Shadur. I mean, he threw a horrible pass that ended the game.
yeah, yeah. So I agree with you there. I think he definitely needs to play one side of the ball. I'm not saying he can't play offense at all. I mean, it'd be nice to sprinkle him in here and there, but he definitely needs more breaks.
I just think he
And
hadn't played in 2 weeks.
yeah. Oh, I'm saying even when he's healthy, like this isn't something that you can keep up through an entire football season. Even
Yeah, yeah,
when I'm assuming he's coming back next year, and he'll be
yeah.
fully healthy again for that. It's great for the first 5 weeks, but then after that, and you're subjecting yourself to the hardest hits as a wide receiver and a cornerback. Um, I just don't think that your body can keep up with that for an entire season. So I think it
Mm-hmm.
specialize in defense. They still use them on special teams. That's fine. And then you don't have to take him off you know, completely on the offense, but definitely give him longer breaks, more rest. Um, but speaking of Colorado's 29-point comeback, who do you think had the most impressive comeback from this past weekend? We saw a bunch of them. So who was to you your most impressive comeback?
Um, I don't have a really good one other than the one that we just talked about. To be honest, I think that is the biggest upset, just because I never would have thought that Dion would take his team into halftime up. What would that be? 5 scores at that point, basically.
Four. Like, you can
4.
make it
Yeah.
4. Yeah.
But I just would have never seen that be the case, and so I think that's the reason why I think that is my pick. What's yours?
For me, I'm actually going to go down the street to Colorado State where they were down 30-10 with 4 minutes left, and they come back and they won. I think that was the most because 4 minutes left. I mean, hey, maybe we can get an onside kick here or something. But once you look up and all of a sudden you're down, you're only down 6, and you're like, damn, like we have a shot at this, and then you chuck up a hail mary and you get it. That's absolutely impressive. I had
Hmm.
very high expectations of Boise State this year. They have really faltered on those, but shout out to Colorado State for getting a huge win at home. So for me, that was my most impressive comeback. Um, Staying in the Pac-12, last thing we'll bring up, back very Pac-12 heavy episode. Um, but Caleb Williams really struggled Saturday night at Notre Dame. He threw 3 interceptions. That USC offense really struggled to get going. They ended up with 350 yards, but you couldn't tell, with only their 20 points. Do you think his performance on Saturday cost him his chance at a back-to-back Heisman? Do you think there's still hope for him? Or what are your feelings on Caleb Williams as it relates to the Heisman after Saturday's performance?
I think that he can still win the Heisman. Yes, I think that in terms of all the categories before Saturday, he was just outperforming everyone. I think that at the time he had one interception, he had like 23 touchdowns, he had a crap ton of yards. I just think that everyone's able to have a bad game. I mean, at the beginning of the season, people were saying Drake May should be in the conversation for Heisman, and this dude's putting up like 170-yard passing games with 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. I think that so much can happen in the Pac-12 that if this is his worst game, if this is his one egg that he laid, I think that he could still win the Heisman if he plays the rest of the season how he was previously.
Yeah. Um, I don't think he's out of the conversation by any means, but between I think there's definitely a little voter fatigue from year to year, and that's why we don't see repeat winners anymore. Because once you win that, if you come back for another season, if you're not one of the guys that wins and then goes to the NFL, All we hear in the news, or the sports news, 24/7 in college football is, "Oh, Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams," and that's all we hear. And I think at some point people get tired of that. Um, but I think if he does end up losing, this is the game, unless something drastic happens down the stretch here. I think this is the game everybody's going to look to and be like, "Well, that performance on the road, throwing the 3 interceptions, that just struggling all across the board is what's going to keep him from winning that." I think he's definitely still going to be a finalist. The other thing that doesn't help is like we brought up at the beginning of the show, how well Bo Nix and Michael Penix played against each other in out in Washington to set the tone for that day, and then Caleb Williams goes out there. Now the good thing for Williams is he gets a chance to play both of those schools coming up. So I mean that a great chance for him to make a statement like, "Hey, I'm still here." Um,
He has the chance to. When is the Heisman voting?
it's
Do
the
you know,
same
like,
day, so it's the week after the Pac or the championship weekend.
okay, so perfect timing
Uh,
because he
yeah,
realistically
I don't
could
know when
eliminate
folks.
both teams and then face like a Utah, Oregon State, someone in the Pac-12 and win that and be like, yeah, I had one bad game.
Yeah. Um, and as far as USC goes, so obviously losing on the road at Notre Dame sucks. I think that's the best defense they'll play this year. Now they do play another extremely good defense this weekend in Utah, which
Mm-hmm.
is not going to be easy for them. But I think once they get past that, it's back to kind of the Pac-12 norm defense. Obviously, that the higher end with Oregon and Washington, but I mean, but you look back at who they played so far with Arizona State and Arizona, you
They
know,
were close.
not the greatest teams, and he kind of really struggled with them. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season unfolds. So we don't think he's completely out of it yet, but like I said, I think if he ends up losing, this is the game everybody points to and says this is why you didn't win. Um, let's move over. We'll talk about the group of five really quick. Who do you think is the group of five representative as of right now to be in the New Year's Six Bowl? We have a couple undefeated teams. Tulane has really rebounded since that Ole Miss game. Air Force is undefeated. There's so much going on. Liberty's still undefeated. All this other stuff. Who do you think gets the at season's end? Who do you think gets the nod as the group of five representative for the New Year's Six?
I think it's Air Force. I think that something has to happen kind of drastically compared to how they've been playing their game so far this season for them to lose, let
Mhm.
alone not get that bid. So I think that they have a really good chance that unless they beat themselves, they're that team.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, they still have to play both service academies, and no matter how good or bad each of them are, it always ends up being a very tight game. We saw that last year. Navy was a horrible football team.
How many
I think
points did Army put up against Troy this weekend?
0. um, but I mean, if you look at last year, they go out, they beat Army, who was a pretty even team across the board, and Navy, who was horrible, goes out and beats them. And then Army and Navy both played Air Force really close. That's just the style of games those guys always play against
Rivalry.
each
Yeah.
other. Yeah. Um, but I mean, Air Force also doesn't have an easy schedule to finish the season. We talked about that
Mhm.
last week. So I'm still leaning towards Tulane. I think they have a pretty generous schedule going forward for them. And I think if it comes down to a one-loss Air Force versus a one-loss Tulane, I think Tulane gets the nod because they play quote unquote tougher competition with the American. So for now, I'm still kind of leaning towards Tulane. But I think if Air Force goes undefeated, there's absolutely no way you can keep them out, especially with them breaking into the top 25 this past week, which I still don't understand why Tulane is not ranked. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Air Force at this point, but Tulane's one loss was at home with a backup quarterback, 10-point game against Ole Miss, who was up in the top 15 as well. I really don't understand why Tulane's still sitting on the outside looking in as far as the top 25 rankings. But we're not going to talk about
Ar-
rankings anymore.
Army also has four dudes that have rushed for over 300 yards, and three of them that'll be two of them that'll be over 500 yards after this weekend. It's ridiculous.
Um, yeah, we're not going to talk about rankings anymore because we've had a long day on TikTok dealing with our top 25 rankings. Um, so let's move on. We'll wrap up our week 7 discussions here. Who was your biggest disappointment of week 7?
Biggest disappointment. Sorry, I'm trying to think here. I mean, I'm not going to take the easy route and say USC. So for me, I think that I'm going to go with Texas Tech. I really expected more out of them against Kansas State, and I didn't feel at any point that they were really going to surprise me and get their offense moving and win that game. So I just thought that they would have a little bit more offensive pressure, and I didn't see that.
Yeah. I got a couple ones. First off, I'm going to say West Virginia, just for how they lost that football game. Especially after we just got done talking about them last week about, hey, who can really upset the status quo in the Big 12 this season? Who's going to disrupt that Texas Oklahoma rematch? And we're like, West Virginia, Texas Tech, and both teams go out there and shit the bed.
Louisville.
Yeah, Louisville's another one. I don't understand how you go on the road to Pitt with 75 fans in attendance and you shit the bed that bad. Like it would have
All
been one thing.
75 of them got their stomach pumped at the hospital Sunday morning.
Yeah, probably. And I had said this before. I mean, Pitt is always good for one upset a year. That's their
You
status
did
quo. I mean,
last
you
week.
think back, what was it, 2007? 2007 when they beat Pat White in West Virginia and kept them out of the national title game. I think back then, I mean, it probably started before that, but as a young football fan, that's when my memories of Pitt first started. And I think back then, I think it was 2019. Miami was undefeated. They go on the road to Pitt. They lose. Pitt beat Clemson one year when they were undefeated. And that's when the whole Clemsoning thing became big, and Dabo Sweeney got pissed off at the media. So that's what Pitt does every year. So the good news for I think Florida State and UNC's already played them. They play another big team in the ACC towards the end of the season. So good news for them is Pitt got their big upset out of the way. So you should be fine. Just play good football. You'll be fine.
Question
Go ahead.
a question I wanted to have for you. What are your thoughts on Rutgers starting the season out the way that they have? I mean, they're 5-0 at home.
Yeah. I think this is a bowl team. I said last week we did the college football stock market. I put a hold on Rutgers because they lost on the road at Wisconsin. It was a really ugly game for Rutgers as well.
Almost lost this past weekend.
Yeah. And I was like, maybe they're just going to fall short of a bowl game again. They're going to be 5-7 and just miss out. And it did not look good to start against Michigan State. I mean, you speak of collapses. That was another one. What was it, 27-10 or something like that going into the fourth quarter, or 20 something? Michigan was upstate, or Michigan State was up pretty big in that game.
With 4 minutes left in the third quarter is when they started their comeback.
Yeah.
It also doesn't help that Rutgers quarterback had his worst game of the season, in my opinion, throwing for like 180 yards and 2 interceptions.
I mean, the weather was absolutely ugly. We were texting a little bit during that game. I mean, the weather was ugly. The play was even uglier on both sides for both teams. But I will never get the image out of my head of the guy going to field the kickoff. It hits the ground, and right as he's about to grab it out of midair, this white jersey or red jersey comes flying out of where it just flashes and the ball's gone. You're like, what the fuck just happened? But I think Rutgers absolutely finds another way to win at least one more game. That's all they need right now. I mean, if you look at their schedule upcoming here, they're on the road to Indiana. That's a game they should win. Then they have a very difficult 3-game stretch with Ohio State, Iowa, and Penn State. And then they finish the season against Maryland, who's really struggled the last 2 weeks. I mean, they go on the road to Ohio State. They look half decent. They kind of fall apart late. And then they lose to Illinois at home this past week, which I took the spread. And, of course, not only did they not have to cover the spread, but they had to lose as well. But I think Rutgers gets to 6-6. I think they legitimately make a bowl game this year, which is huge for that program and Greg Schiano as well. And there's a lot of things.
Almost crying.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things this season that are going to happen, or that at least have happened, to continue to build off of and get your program going in the right direction, so you can maybe be up there with a Maryland. Kind of finishing that in that tier with Maryland. So we talked about the biggest disappointment. Who was your biggest surprise of week 7?
It's got to be Iowa. I mean, you just talked about it. You talk about Rutgers going on this stretch of games, and like if you just look at teams and you hear everything you hear about Iowa, and then you hear Rutgers is having like this miracle season in terms of what they're used to with their football program, 5-0 at home, 5-2 on the season. I mean, they looked great for the first 25 minutes of play against Ohio State. And then you just look at it and you're like, Iowa's going to go 11-1, make the Big Ten championship, and then they're going to get waxed by whichever of the three teams come out of the other side of the Big Ten. It's just ridiculous to think that the offensive coordinator, he's not going to get fired if they make the Big Ten championship. I mean, they're not going to go with this stipulation of you have to average 25 points a game if the team makes the Big Ten championship. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I think he should be fired? Yes. Yeah. You didn't meet the contract, but do you think that they're really going to fire this dude? How do you fire someone?
No, I mean, I brought that up. Yeah, I brought that up on Saturday. I was like, this guy's going to fuck around and keep his job anyway. Yeah, no, I can see it, absolutely see it happening. The one thing I'm kind of like laughing at in the back of my head, looking at the Big Ten standings, is if you look, Northwestern and Nebraska, they're going to play this weekend, but they're both sitting at 1-2 in the conference. They both still have to play Iowa. I mean, Nebraska's going to play Iowa the very last week of the season. Could you imagine? Nebraska, and I'm jinxing them right now, so I apologize in advance, Tony. But could you imagine they go on a run, they're undefeated, and then you have two of like what should be the worst football teams, and especially in the Big Ten, are playing for a chance to go play Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, whoever in the Big Ten championship.
Ridiculous.
But as far as my biggest surprise of Week 7, I'm going to go with Oklahoma State. And I had said this when I did my college football stock market this week. This is a team we all thought was dead in the water just a few weeks ago. I mean, they lose an ugly game to South Alabama, 33-7. And all of a sudden, here they are. They beat Kansas State, the defending Big 12 champion. And then they have Kansas come to town, who's a ranked team, who's pretty good. And they beat them, pretty handed. It ended up being a close game, but I mean, they had a control in Kansas that entire time. And now you look at their upcoming schedule, and it's like, not that I just don't think they still have a chance at the Big 12, but they have a much better outlook on their season as compared to what it was just a few weeks ago, like I had mentioned. So let's go ahead.
Real quick, sorry, I wanted to ask you a quick question. So we saw LSU just pound Auburn this weekend after Auburn had a 7-point loss to Georgia, the number 1 team in the nation. Well, sorry, I think they're like 7th in our rankings. But anyway, Alabama's offense is nowhere near the offense that LSU has, and their offense at this time is nowhere near Georgia's offense. Do you think that Alabama should be favored by more than a field goal in that game when that comes out?
I think they will because of, I mean, presumably Alabama will maybe have 2 losses by then. I think worst case scenario, Alabama has 2 losses. They'll still be ranked. Obviously, Auburn won't be in the rankings. But honestly, probably not. I mean, now Alabama's offense has looked better week over week. But the other thing looking at that game is, I mean,
week over week, they won 3 points against Arkansas. They won by 3 points against Arkansas.
Well, I mean, that was mainly their defense shitting the bed against Arkansas. I mean, my favorite part about this past weekend was Nick Saban's interview when he's like, I've never seen a quarterback just throw a defender down like that before. He's like, it looked like a smacking an attitude of that. So I was like, oh my god. But I mean, I hate that. I feel like we're kind of overusing this cliche at this point, but it's very true. I mean, it proves itself true time over time. That's going to be a rivalry game. Those two hate each other. I mean, I think back to 2 years ago, Auburn had like 2 wins, and the starting quarterback was Bo Nix. He was hurt, so he didn't play. They had like a 3rd string quarterback in, and the game damn near went to overtime. Actually, no, it did go to overtime. And those 2 teams, they hate each other. They bring the best out in each other. So those games are almost always close. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it should be more than 3 points, but I think it will be. And I think we should bet on Auburn to cover that spread if it is. So let's go ahead. Let's look at our updated pick'em and cash out standings. It's been tough sledding here in the cash out division, but we'll look at picks first. Slade, you're still 4 games back. You tied Nick this past week. I made up 2 games, so I'm sitting at what 8, 7. I'm 7 games back, so I'll take it. I'll keep biting chunks out of that, and then I'm gonna fall like 6 games back to him again this weekend. So, uh, but yeah, so those are updated pick standings, and then excuse me, our updated cash out records. Slade, you're having a really rough go here. But I'm still sitting at 500. I'm at 9-9 after another 1-1 weekend. And Nick had a 2-0 weekend, so he's up to 11-6. Slade, you're sitting there at 4-12-1. We've had a fun time just betting the opposite of whatever you picked here the past couple weeks.
I will say that yours is a good representation of or never mind. Sorry. I'm talking about upset alerts and with the comment that I was going to make. Never mind.
No. I see. We don't have upset alert, but you can talk about it if you want to.
I think that when Nick listens to this, that he should have to pick upsets that are more than 9.5 points. I think that he's done a very good job of picking spreads that are within a touchdown and field goal score.
Let's see. I think I already put my pick in for this weekend. Who did I take? I took Utah. They're a 5-point underdog against USC, so that's what I took this week. I'm just adopting his strategy at this point.
Yeah.
So,
Can't beat it. Go with it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So let's go ahead. Let's look at Thursday's game. Some college football games are going on right now as we're recording this, but Thursday night we're gonna have a huge matchup in the Sun Belt. James Madison is traveling to Marshall. Marshall is 4-2. James Madison is undefeated. This will be 7 o'clock on ESPN. This is unfortunately it doesn't have huge implications in the Sun Belt race because it doesn't matter what James Madison does because the NCAA is fucking stupid. That's a conversation for another day though. So Nick is going to go with James Madison on the road. Slade, who do you got in this matchup?
Yeah, I'm going with James Madison as well. I said it last week. I think that this team is on a roll, and it's just a very, very unfortunate case that they're doing great again and they're still not eligible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this will happen because James Madison is a developed program. They won the FCS title in 2016. I mean, they've been a staple even before that. But I mean, the shitty part is like watch them. They're finally bowl eligible next year, and they're going to be like a 4-8 team or something like that. But if I'm going to go with James Madison as well. And looking at this, I was thoroughly impressed with how they just pummeled Georgia Southern last week. And Georgia Southern was a pretty good football team. They only had 1 loss up to that point, which was on the road at Wisconsin. And then they show up to James Madison. I think this is going to be a pretty good football game. And next thing I know, I look up and it's like 28-0. And James Madison was just taking it to him the entire game. Very good football game for James Madison across the board. And then looking at Marshall, they were 4-0, and now they've lost their last 2 games in pretty ugly fashion. The NC State game, back and forth. But then they go on the road to Georgia State. And Georgia State is nothing to sneer at. But I think Marshall should have played a lot better in that game. And they didn't. They lose 41-24 to Georgia State.
So you watch these teams a little bit more. Last weekend, was that a fluke for the way that Georgia Southern played? Georgia Southern. They beat Coastal Carolina. I mean, they were 4-1 going into that game, and it looked as if they had put a high school team out there against James Madison. Which I mean, that's saying it nicely. I watched the first half of this game, and they just ran the ball past them every time they ran the ball, it was like the floodgates open, and every person that was on Georgia Southern's team went to the opposite side of the field. I didn't know if that's just how good James Madison is, or if that was like a fluke game for Georgia Southern, because I expected this to be like a 10-point game. I expected to be really good, and then James Madison just kind of like get an extra score or 2 in the fourth quarter to kind of make it seem as if maybe it wasn't that close. But this from the start was sad.
Yeah. No, I think it just is that telling of how good James Madison is. I will also say, I think this, I forget how long they said the streak was, but at one point, I mean, it was a shutout, and they said maybe Georgia Southern had a field goal, but they said the last time Georgia Southern was held without a touchdown was like years ago, and I was like, oh damn! And then like they scored on like their last drive or something.
Yeah, they had 2 field goals in the second quarter, and then they didn't score again until fourth quarter with 26 seconds left.
Yeah. No, I think it's just telling, and I think another thing we see with a lot of these teams as well is, um, why should we play James Madison tough this game? In the grand scheme of things, doesn't really matter. I feel like that's how a lot of these college kids
I see where you're
approach it.
going.
Is like, is hey, they, if we lose to them, it doesn't really affect our standings. It's not like this is going to put them in the
It's not a
Sun Belt
conference
title game.
loss.
Right. I mean, it still counts towards your record,
Yeah.
but I mean, if say you end up, this is your only conference losses on the road to James Madison, you end up undefeated. They're not going to put James Madison in over you into the conference title game. And so I think from a college age kid standpoint, I think that could be another way a lot of these teams look at this game as well. So let's move on. And so instead of a draft this week, what Slade and I are going to do is try and build the ultimate college football team based off of 7 parameters. We're going to take turns picking these. You can only use a school one time each. So if Slade, we'll talk about the parameters and then kind of get into the rules a little bit more. It's not overly complicated. The 7 parameters are the location, the history of the program, the mascot, the head coach, the fans, the uniforms, and the stadium. So again, Slade can only use Penn State for one. He can only use Penn State's location. He can't use it again for stadium or fans or anything like that. But I am still allowed to use Penn State. I can't use it in the same bracket, but I can use it for a different bracket. And so I think we should get some pretty good results here, and we'll let you guys decide who has the better one. Slade, I'll let you go first. Give us your dream location or best location.
Location, to me, this seems like an easy one. I'm going with Hawaii. I think that every team that flies into your stadium or to play you in that location is already a disadvantage. I think that half the schools are 20 hours away in terms of flights. Some of them maybe same time zone, but it's still a long flight, and I just think that is a big difference for these teams.
Yeah.
What are you going with?
So I have 2. The one I'm going to go with is App State. I think that's one of the best
Cool
locations in
environment.
college football. Yeah, and I'm not taking the stadium, just the location, but I'm a mountain guy. I like being up in the mountains. I'm excited. I'm going up there on November 4th. I'm excited to see that stadium. But I think just the way it's kind of tucked into the mountainside there, I think it's perfect. The other one I was looking at was Tennessee, just because it's in the mountains. It has a river right there. But I'm going to go App State for location.
I did want to say real quick, Washington Stadium is pretty cool.
Yes.
The fact that they just have yachts pull up in the water there while the
Yeah.
game is happening is really cool.
My only complaint, and it's not a huge deal, and I didn't realize this until they showed like a panoramic shot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I wish the stadium was butted up to the lake. I think there's like a
Yeah,
baseball stadium behind it. I'd rather and it doesn't make a big difference because it's somewhat like closed in, like they have stands in the back of the end zone there, so it's not like the lake is right there. But I think that'd be a little bit cooler is if you just had it butted straight up to the lake. That'd be
that
my
would
only.
be.
So what school history are you looking to take?
Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to?
No, that's you. Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. I'm gonna go with University of Miami. I think that just the hard nosed '90s, 2000s Miami is the history that I'm looking at. The team kind of playing around.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna go with. So I want to save this one for later. I'm gonna go with Notre Dame. A winning tradition, winning program. 11 national titles. So that's kind of the reason or the way I looked at it differently. Is give me the winning history, the prestige, the program. I feel like it's really very well looked upon by recruits and stuff. So that's kind of the approach I took towards it. So I'm gonna go Notre Dame there. Um, give me who would you take for coach?
Coach, I'm going Kirby Smart. I'm going recency. I think that he is Nick Saban 2.0. until he proves me otherwise. I think that he's really great at recruiting. It seems like he's really great at player development. I mean, all the teams now are getting 5-star recruits.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just one school, Alabama, or one school, Florida State, or whoever's running the table at the time, getting all the 5-star recruits. Everyone is getting 5-star recruits. So I just think that he is the best at that job right now.
Yeah. I'm going to go on the flip side of the coin. I'm going to take Saban. I think even when he's not bringing in the highest of 5-star recruits, he can get the most out of that team on the football field. Obviously, he's very proven. He has goddamn how many national titles to his name. So I'm going to take Nick Saban there. What fan base are you taking to support your school?
I'm going with Penn State on this one.
I think that's a good one to take. This is going to surprise a lot of people. I feel like I'm going to take Virginia Tech. This is a fan base. No matter how good or bad their team is, they sell out that stadium regularly. I think the other one I was looking at was Nebraska because again, same thing. No matter how bad the team is, they have that sellout streak. Granted,
Anderson, man, one.
yeah, it should have an asterisk next to it, but I think just kind of the rural Virginia vibe it has to it being there, and how much I'm 3 hours away in Charlotte. I see Virginia Tech license plates everywhere. I think that's a team and a school a lot of people buy into and they love no matter how good or bad things are. So I'm going to take Virginia Tech for fans.
Wait, did you say that Nebraska's sellout record should have an asterisk next to it?
Yes, because so what happened last year
I just wanted you to
is
elaborate on it for
yeah.
me. Yeah,
So
a
what happened
booster
last
buys the
year?
tickets.
Yeah, and once they realize, oh,
Uh,
tickets aren't selling out, they buy them and then
mhm.
resell them. So technically, all the tickets were sold. So the streak continues. So that's why I said, and I mean that last year was definitely not the first time that ever happened. But that's why I said there should be a little asterisk next to it. Um, so whose uniforms are you going to take?
um, I'm gonna steal one from you. I'm going to Oregon.
I figured you would, so I had a backup just in case. I'm going to go with Ohio State. I think they're very clean uniforms. I like the silver helmets with the stripe. And I was talking to you before. I was trying to think of somebody who had like a good black uniform that they wear regularly. I love Ohio State's blackout uniforms. I think they're really cool. And then if you look at road uniforms, I really like how the white and red contradict or contrast themselves. I think it's some of the cleanest uniforms out there. So I'll take Ohio State for that. Give me what mascot are you gonna take?
I'm gonna go with Bevo. I think that he almost took a Uga's life, and he'll take your mascot's life too if you're not careful.
Um, you left it for me, so I'm gonna take the Ducks here. So I'll take Oregon's mascot.
The dude's
I
got to
want
be jacked.
I know I wanted something different, so my backup was James Madison.
Mhm. The
Because
Duke.
I think the Dukes, it's a bulldog, but still, I think that's a cool.
Hmm.
I want something different rather than just the basic bulldogs or a tiger, where like 10 schools are tigers. So I'll take the Ducks there though. I'll happily take it. And last but not least, what stadium are you taking to house this powerhouse college football program?
I'm going Bryant Denny, Alabama.
Okay.
I don't think I picked them
Um,
for anything else, right?
no, you didn't. Yeah, because you took Kirby Smart for head coach. Um,
Yeah.
I'm going to take the
I
big house. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
elaborate.
No. So I was going to take Alabama for my history and then the big house for the stadium, but I switched it up. So it's really funny that you had the big house for your stadium.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, but it's the second biggest college football stadium. I know it's one or two.
Michigan,
Yeah,
it's number one.
it is number.
Yeah.
I always get the number. I think what they're 109 and Penn State's 107. For some reason, I always flip those two.
Yeah, without
Um,
standing room, Michigan can put like 115 in the stands or like in the building and count the numbers. Penn State's max is like 110.
yeah. Um, but I guess because in my mind, just looking at them,
Yeah.
Penn State's looks because Michigan sits down in. Like a
Right,
lot of
right.
people don't realize that there's an no, I would say half a Notre Dame stadium. Like the way they were built, they sit down in the ground,
Set up like
so
the
they don't
Bills Stadium.
so they don't look like these giant stadiums. But whenever you walk up to Happy Valley or Penn State, you're like, holy shit, that's fucking big.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think that's the other thing that always like tricks my brain is the who's is bigger. But I mean, could you imagine that stadium shoved in the side of a mountain? And like, I think that'd be cool as hell.
Yeah.
So I feel like we built some pretty good college football teams there. We'll have to see who thinks is better. That'll wrap up our show for this week. That'll wrap up our show for this week. As always, we thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget Friday night at 7 p.m. Slade and I will be doing another Swear Jar Sweat. We'll be watching SMU at Temple. We're taking, thanks to the will of destiny, we are taking under 57.5. We'll also be doing some trivia, some college football Q&A. So drop some questions for us, and then we'll just be talking, getting you guys ready for Week 8. We might have some friends stop by. So it's going to be a great time. Hope to see you there. And then, as always, Saturday morning, we are live with Out of the Tunnel to get you fully ready for Week 8. It's going to be a fun Saturday morning show. So hopefully you guys stop by for that as well. That'll do it for this week's episode. We will see you in the next video.